Morning, everyone. It's Rollie, and I want to welcome you back to Chatting with Wisdom. And so here we are at on Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and I'm chuckling about that because our guest today is in Mountain Time, and it's very early over there. And so early this morning was trying desperately to be able to get logged in, and it's not working. And what's going on and what's happening? Because apparently we move into daylight time, but they don't. So here's a conundrum that we're in. So welcome everybody. So today we're going to meet with Kathleen Pickrel, who has spent most of her career as a medical social worker working with cancer patients. In 2014, her husband of 25 years passed away, sending her on a journey of figuring out life on her own for the first time ever. Ultimately, she was able to create new, positive life for herself. She has taken her passion for helping people and the knowledge that she has gained along the way, and is now working with widows, coaching them through the steps that she took to creating a positive life after death. Kathleen has her master's in social work and is a licensed master social worker. She is also the author of the book It Is What It Is. I love that. Now what? And a guide for getting from where you are to who you want to be. Apparently that's a twister for me this morning. So welcome, Kathleen. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. Thank you. Yeah, the book title is a mouthful, so it's
great though. I love it. It is what it is. And I say that often. It is what it is. Right? So this is beautiful. So thank you so much for joining us this morning. So can you tell me a little bit more about who you are, so we know kind of generally who you are, but tell me a little bit more.
Oh boy. Yes. So I actually went back to school late in life. I had no college, no anything. I decided to go back to work when my kids were 3 and 4. And so I worked my way through school, learned a lot that way, being a parent while going to school. And life was kind of rolling along, and I went into social work, and my very first job was with hospice. I walked in after I graduated. I just walked in and said, "Hey, are you hiring?" And they said, "Hey, yeah, we are." And that's how my career in social work started. And I liked working with that population, but then I ultimately was able to go back to where I was, where I interned at the cancer center, and I worked for the next 10 years or so, sitting at the same desk that I interned at, and working with my mentor. And she is a wonderful person. She's retired now, but I learned so much because she was a master in working with people, and Reiki master trained. And so I learned a lot along the way. But life was moving along. And in 2014, yeah, my husband passed away, and that just really life changed in that moment. And it was unexpected. He had medical issues. He did have issues, heart issues. Went to the doctor after an episode, and they did a stress test and said, "Oh, everything looks like it did about 3 years ago, but let's do this angiogram to make sure." And he'd had them before. He's even like, "Go to work. This is routine for us. We know this stuff," but I didn't. And I'm very glad. And when we got to the hospital, we checked him in, and I just remember him being kind of wheeled into the procedure, and him just like looking at me like, and that's like the last picture I have. And so an hour later, a case manager is coming out and telling me that they're trying to revive him. And they spent an hour trying to revive him, and they didn't. And so that's when everything just shifted. I had never lived on my own. Ever. And so, yeah, I had to kind of figure things out from there while grieving and going through all of those things.
And I don't and I honestly don't even know which is worse, right? So knowing that somebody's going to pass, or having that sudden change and that life changing, and I often say that, like, right, like I don't know,
Mhm.
I don't honestly know what would be worse, right? So the suddenly would be like you're not watching them suffer, but then suddenly it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not even ready,
I think
right?
about that all the time, right? Which is better of the horrible things, right?
Yeah,
Right, because I work with cancer patients so much, and so the ones who do sadly pass away, they're on this longer trajectory, a longer
yeah,
path, and there are benefits and blessings in that, because if there are things that are left unsaid, or people that they need to make amends with, or things that they still want to get done even though they're sick, they have that.
yeah.
Whereas when it's instantaneous, um, all that goes away. However, they don't suffer.
Yeah.
So they suffer, but we do. They don't suffer, but we do.
We do. And we suffer either way though, don't we?
Oh, we do. We
So like
do.
either way, so it's like, so those of us that get left behind, and I know that there, and I don't know about in the US, but I know that in Canada, or at least in the areas that I'm in, is that there's so much of that grieving process that's stopped because people don't do the funerals anymore, right? So it's
Yes, yes, exactly. Actually, I co-facilitate a grief support group twice a month on Zoom that I started basically because, yes, everything shut down and people had this extra layer of issues and grief to deal with because their loved one went to the hospital and they couldn't go, or they couldn't be there at the end, and or and they've passed from COVID, and there couldn't be a funeral, people couldn't travel, and so yeah, I started a support group for that, which is still ongoing at this time, just for that very reason.
Well, and like that's, and I wasn't even thinking of it from that perspective. I was thinking of it from a perspective of like like for example, when my dad passed, is even though we had things are opened up and we were able to have a funeral, is that his wishes were like no funerals, right? So like there's no
Ah,
funeral, there's no, and we have a lot of that up here in our area. Is like as per the request of the of the deceased, there's no grieving, there's not that opportunity for the grieving, still happens obviously, but it's that
right.
community and that communion of people gathering and supporting each other that makes that process a little easier.
Exactly. There's a difference between grieving and mourning. Grieving is what we do internally. That's that feeling that we have, but mourning is the public expression of that. And we as people, being communal beings, we need often, usually, some sort of mourning process where we can come together, and in whatever way, works for you. But so often when families are denied that, it's really difficult, because
Yeah,
the mourning process is for the living.
yeah, and it does, and it really does make that difference. And I where we are is it's referred to as grieving. So but
Right, right,
I'm
yeah.
also French, so for me, like both, but you're right,
Ah.
that is, there is a distinction between the two, and I didn't correlate the two. So,
And
um,
usually we all just call it grieving, right? So, I mean, it's, unless
but
you're, in the field and a professional, you're going to call it all grieving, but there really is a difference between grieving and mourning, which is the public expression and the coming together communally of that.
and there is, and I definitely agree to that. And but it was just that I was just stating that it was like, wow, oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. So like, and sometimes that's something that we forget, is that there's those two different processes of that internal part of things. Because one of the things that I hear often from people is, yeah, well, like they died a year ago, like why can't you get over it? And I'm not sure if that's something that that you hear. You hear that.
Yes, well, I hear that from the people I work with, being told that all the time, or
Yeah,
even like, it's been 3 months. Why are you still sad? Or, are you ready to date again? Or, all these things. And I think when people say that, they haven't maybe lost someone close to them, where they go through that grieving continues the rest of your life. That person is gone. They're not, and as long as they're gone, you're going to be grieving, and it just takes different forms, and it's different for everyone in the time frame on how they kind of incorporate that into your life. It doesn't go away. You just kind of incorporate it differently at different times. And it's different for everyone. And we place such judgment on what that should look like.
Yeah.
And there's no right way.
Well, and I know that there's like so many trajectories as to like where it is that goes on, and somebody just hearted that particular statement that you just made. So thank you for that, because that is so important for us to be able to. And I don't normally comment on like the likes or the hearts or whatever, but it was just like perfect timing in terms of that. So thank you for that. And because I think that is extremely important, is that we take a look at what is that supposed to look like for us. So so like you working in the field, so you working in the field would make a huge difference in terms of what it is that things should look like versus what it is that things do look like for you. Like, how did that impact your life in terms of your grief?
Interestingly, it's a really good question. I think fortunately for me, with having my training and my background, and then working with people and seeing that it just doesn't look the same for anybody, that eventually, when it first happens, of course, you're just in shock and you're just trying to deal with everything that, when someone dies, there's a lot of work that happens. And so sometimes we get super busy doing the work and we haven't kind of processed the grief. And that's kind of what I did at the beginning is, okay, time to get busy. I got things to do, because then you don't have to deal with the feelings, right? Time to prepare. If you're going to have a service, time to prepare the service. And then the busyness kind of stops. And that's for me when I'm like, okay, ooh, I don't like the way this feels. But I was able to, because I do know certain things and I have had certain training and I've seen a lot of people that what I needed to do was really check in with myself. And one of the biggest things I think that could be helpful to people, it was for me, is what do I need? What do I need today? What do I need right now? Because it can change from day to day. It can change from minute to minute. But we are so outer focused on the world that we don't really say, what do I need today? And if I need to not go to work today, then I don't go to work today. If you have that luxury that you can do that. And I remember a pivotal moment. So I was working at the cancer center. Terry had passed away. It had been only about 3 months. And I parked in the parking structure. I was getting ready to walk. We were in the actual hospital at that time. And I'm standing there in the parking structure looking at the building. And I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. It just hit me like in an instant.
Yeah.
And I walked into my manager's office and said, I'm putting in my notice. So I quit for a full year. I did other things. But I was able to do what was right for me.
Yeah.
And we have to give ourselves permission. We have to acknowledge it, accept it, and then give ourselves permission to actually do it.
And that's sometimes probably one of the most challenging parts, is being able to give ourselves permission to do whatever it is that needs to happen, isn't it?
Oh, I think that's one of the biggest things. Often we know, or we have an inkling of what the right thing for us is, but then we have, all of everyone else's opinions. What are they going to think? What are they going to say? And I love the saying that there's this quote, and I'm not sure who to attribute it to, but it's your opinion of me doesn't matter. Like, I shouldn't know your opinion of me.
Yeah. And
but people share all the time, all their opinions, and they aren't always the most helpful. So it makes it really hard for us to do our own thing.
And sometimes those opinions are opinions that are not warranted. Like, so they didn't even ask you for your opinion. Like, why are you asking? Right? So,
so much. Yes. And very unhelpful ones too. What you should be doing, or why, or the questions that are with judgment behind them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And like, well, why are you doing it like that? Why?
Are you sure you want to do that? Or yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
Oh,
and because they're just asking, right? But
yeah.
it's like it's what the answer to the question really is what the challenge is. And so what are some of the things that people can do so that they can be more assertive when they are going through, because you feel lost when you've lost someone.
You do. So some of the things that they can do when other people approach them
When
and
they're,
say,
yeah, so like how can you stay assertive as to what it is and be able to meet that, like, okay, this is what's right for me and I'm going to do what's right for me. How can people kind of work through that part?
right. So I think, and it's a practice. It's like a muscle, like anything else, right? If we're not used to doing that in the rest of our lives, and now we're in this grief in a very vulnerable spot, it's difficult. So number one, practice it now before you're dealing with it, right? So whatever's right for you, practice ahead of time, how you're going to respond to things, and people say things. And, there's number one, thank you for your opinion. End of
Yeah.
statement. That's it. Thank you. Thank you for your opinion. That wasn't very helpful, but thank you. And being clear, the clearer we can be with what we want and what we need, makes us more able to then be firm in ourselves. And so I think that's the hard work or it takes time to really become aware of what I want. So when we find ourselves in situations and there's a judgment, we already know in our hearts what we want and what's right for us. It makes it a lot easier to say thank you, or I this is what I'm doing is what's best for me right now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that must have been really challenging, like even for you, going into your boss and saying, okay, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Like, did you get any feedback from either your employer or from family or friends?
No, I gave like the standard notice. So I did. I didn't like walk out. So, no, and that's the other thing. We presume we know how people will react when we do or say things, but we don't always know. So I walked in there, and I for that particular thing, it was deep in my gut. So I had no trouble walking in there and saying that. And they were very nice and understanding. But it didn't matter if they weren't. That's the key. It didn't matter. And people were, I think, generally supportive. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So you just never know.
Yeah. And you don't, right? So like I would have thought, coming from that perspective, because it's always like, oh, you don't make any life changes for a whole year, and right, like all those underlying rules.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And like you're going in 3 months later going like, yeah, I'm not doing this.
I'm done. Yeah. And generally that is a good rule of thumb. Don't make any major life changes in that first year. Some of those things like selling your house if you don't have to, because you're going to ride a bit of a roller coaster of emotion, as to like if you get rid of things, you may kind of regret that. And so if there are things you don't want to see, maybe box them up and put them away and then decide later. So yeah, generally it's a good rule of thumb, but it isn't across the board, right?
Yeah.
That's, my mom got rid of some stuff, and then she was a bit regretting some of the stuff.
And we never know how we're going to move forward, right? We never know what it is that's going to be triggering. And so like I shared that my dad passed away, and I really love dream catchers. Dream catchers are absolutely beautiful. My dad has absolutely no understanding of what a dream catcher is and why we use it and the purpose of it, but he just knows that I enjoy it. And so because I did a lot of traveling with him and for his medical appointments and stuff, while he was not well, and so we stopped someplace and he got this dream catcher.
Oh,
And like, it is like, I don't want to say anything for fear of like the artist seeing it and saying, hey, that's mine, but I don't like it.
okay.
Don't like it. It's like, it's not pretty. It's not something that I would have actually gone out and bought, but it was a dream catcher, and it was something that that he thought like, hey, she really enjoys that. So then he handed it to me, and he's like, here, I bought this for you. And he was thinking that I was going to put it on my keychain and proudly wear it,
Hmm.
but I didn't. I just brought it with me, and I said thank you very much, and I sat it on my I have some things that I hang things on my desk. And after he passed, that was one of the things that it was like, hey, I need to put this closer to where I am. And so now it actually
Um,
sits at my desk. And even though it's still not something that I enjoy looking at, it's not something that is like super pretty, but it's like, hey, this comes from my dad,
yeah.
and it came from like that genuine place. And so like, we would never know had I have just taken it and thrown it away. And but it was like,
Right.
but I also knew that my dad would come in and say, hey, where's that thing that I gave you? So, like, so
Yeah.
I didn't discard it. And so
Right.
I had just set it there. And then it was just one day that it was like, hey, I have that I know what his intention is behind it. And
Right.
that was what was really important, right? So
Right. So it has meaning and it keeps you connected to him now.
yeah. So like,
Yeah.
it's funny how we have different things that, like you said, like just tucking it away, and because perhaps later that will be important.
Exactly. Exactly. And we just do the best we can at the moment anyway. So if, if that has happened where you regret maybe giving some stuff away, then, you're doing the best you could at the time. You made decisions based on where you were. And we don't always think, well, I, we think we're going to feel the same always, but it changes and we don't really notice that.
It really does.
Yeah.
So how long has it been since your husband's passed? Like, how long has this transformation and transition been for you?
So it will be 7 years, November 5th. So we're coming up on the anniversary. Yeah, it's been 7 years almost.
So, and so like, during these 7 years, how has that transition been for you?
Well, so about, I'd say almost getting close to a year in after being sad and grieving and crying all the time and feeling lonely and isolated, even though I had plenty of friends and all of the things. Um, I woke up one day. I kind of had an epiphany. I woke up one day and had this realization because I was only 48, when that happened, and so I woke up and I realized, oh my gosh, I could live another 30, 40 years. I don't want to live like this.
Yeah.
I don't want my life to be like this. So that kind of turned on a light bulb. And, I have tools that I've learned, and so that started kind of my journey of change. And from there, I just started, I had, I decided I wanted to work with people and help them, not just in the way I was as a social worker,
Yeah.
but kind of shifting into the coaching world, which I do as well, obviously now. So I still work. I work one day a week at the cancer center per diem to kind of keep into that, and then the rest of the time I am working on my coaching business, my private coaching business. So there was that shift, and the first part of shifting into entrepreneurship was I want to write a book. So I wrote the book, but that was a huge growth process for me because who am I to write a book? Who are you? There are people who have books out there and they know so much, and you know you're not good enough to write a book. So all of that stuff kind of came in of not being worthy, not being good enough, and stuff that I dealt with my whole life. And now I was able to start working on it in a different way. And that's kind of where the change began, and kind of working on these fears that I had about not being good enough, imposter syndrome. Um, and I've just kept growing from there.
That's beautiful, because, and that transition is, life altering, like, right? So like that
Right.
epiphany that you had is like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing this. I can't do this anymore. And I don't want to be feeling this and having that, that idea that, okay, I've still got this many more years potentially, right? So more,
It
right?
was
So
huge. Right. Yes. Yes. We're given this amount of time, whatever it is. What do you want to do with it? So I was able to kind of shift focus from what I've lost and all of those things into, well, what if I'm going to live life now? What do I want that to look like? And so I
yeah.
started that process of creating that.
And I love how you're what you've done is you've taken what you've experienced, like, so you've got years of experience behind you on top
Mhm.
of your own life experience, but being able to have somebody understand you from that level, I think makes a huge difference. In terms, I personally think that that makes a huge difference because
Yeah.
we so in the social work field, it's like, well, you can't, and we were talking about that before going on, right? Like, you're not supposed to be crying, you're not supposed to be showing your emotion, and you're not supposed to have all these different things. But I know that my clients have over the years said to me, I love the fact that you understand where I'm coming from.
Abso-freaking-lutely, if I can say that. Yes,
Absolutely.
yeah, because there's a connection there, and then you feel like they understand, and I'd like to share a little story about when my husband passed away. So the doctor who did the angiogram on him, we had never met him. He's a very renowned doctor in Tucson, is fabulous, um, but his regular cardiologist doesn't do the procedure. So this doctor was doing the procedure. We just met him uh, like 10 minutes before he went in for this procedure that ultimately failed. And uh, after um, after they had been trying to revive him for over an hour, the case manager said, "We want to take you to what I call the bad news room, so you don't like scare the other people in the waiting room."
Yeah.
So we went to the bad news room, and so I knew it was coming. And the doctor came in, and he started saying, like, what happened, and he started crying. He started doing the ugly cry. I mean, we're not like tears rolling down his face. He was really crying. And he was just talking about how, this was only the second patient he'd ever lost, and they were the same age. He and the doctor were the same age, um, uh, and that meant the world to me. That was like he cared.
Yeah.
He didn't come in like many other doctors would, like, oh, yep, this is what I did. I'm so sorry that didn't work out, and leave the room. No, he really cared, and it really made a difference.
And it really does, right? So
Oh yeah,
here
I know. See, we're ready. We're ready.
Kathleen warned me that I may need Kleenex, so I grabbed the Kleenex in front of me.
Yes.
Because like even when my dad passed, right? So like we knew that my dad was passing, and the doctor was there, and she's been on this journey with him for the last 5 years as much as we had been. And that was one of the things, is that as things were happening, is that she had those tears, she had those emotions, she was going to miss him just as much as we did, and she expressed that, and that was one of the things that my dad absolutely loved about her, is that she was a straight shooter. She would call it like it was, and in all of the experience that he had with her, because his illness was has been long term. His illnesses, I should say, because he's had more than one, and so it had been long term. And so when he started working with her, and she had come in, she was a brand new doctor coming into the area, and so she and he was like, okay, great, so like, I've got this brand new newbie doctor, and like, how are we going to be, like, I had trouble with the old guy, like, how am I going to be dealing with this young person?
Right.
But she listened to him. And so, and I recall the one time, because my dad was very difficult, and and we all know that he was definitely difficult. And one of the things that she had said at one point, and he was she looked at him and she said, and he didn't like to be called Mr. It was always, here's my name, let's call me by my name. I'm not a mister, like that's my dad. And so, and that's always been his statement. And so he was going on and on about something that she had repeated 1,000 times, and it wasn't something that could change. And she looked at him and she said, Mr. Allaire, I said blah, 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 whatever it was. And then she's like, okay, and we're done. And you guys, I'll talk about this later. And she left. She ended the conversation. She was so frustrated with him. And out of all the years, that's the only time that she had ever been frustrated with him. And so, and I'm not saying that that's the only time she's ever been frustrated with him, but that was the only time that she expressed
right, right.
So then he left, and he was like, I don't think she likes me. And he took that completely personal. Aww. And it was like, had nothing to do with that. But dad, he kept, because I attended all of his appointments, right? Because he didn't always remember things or understand them. So he would be, and so it's like, okay, but she said blah, 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 blah. And like, this is what you need to be doing. And this is what was going on. And you weren't listening. And he's like, but I don't think she likes me.
Oh,
we're gonna have to find a new doctor. And but
it really got to him, huh?
It really did.
Aww.
But like I said, like she was there on the day that he passed, and it was really and she heard and understood, and she was there, and so it made, at least it does to me, right? So like it was really important to me that he was not her case file. He was not just one of her patients. He was a human, and it was important to her. And so he had this clipboard that he always used. And when she started coming to do home visits, and he would hand her the clipboard so that she can do her notes or whatever on it. And she's like, hey, this is like a quality, because it's like an old clipboard. This is like a quality. You can't buy these. And so he gifted that to her the day that he died. And so and she sent us a note. She sent a note to my mom and said, well, just so that you know, his clipboard is being put to use, right? So like it's
that's so sweet.
And it's those things, right? Like, so this doctor that came in and he shared like from his heart, like it must have been challenging for him. Like, this is only his second patient, and it's a routine procedure, and people typically do not die from this procedure. Like, yes, there are those chances and there are those different things. And so just being able to bear his soul in that moment
was amazing. I've thought about maybe contacting him again and just like maybe even interviewing him about, you know, what was that like for you? I can tell you what that was like for me and how much I appreciated it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that really is, right? So like, it's that connection. But when we're in school, we're taught you're not supposed to show your emotions. You're supposed to stay straight faced. And I know that I could never, like, it didn't matter how much that I tried or practiced. I wear my heart in my sleeve. So when my clients were dying, or when a family member's client was my client's family member was dying and I was supporting them, like that was always one of those challenges, right? So I commend you on, because being in hospice or doing cancer care, that's not something that I would be able to do on a regular basis, because I would be so emotional all the time.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I'm right there with you, though. I mean, I can't not cry. It's a physical impossibility for me when I see other people cry or emotions well on me. I've gotten it a little better under check. Growing up, you know, I always cried at the sad commercials, the happy commercials. Yeah. So we just feel things, and but I've just said, you know what, this is just me, and that's okay. And I think it's a strength. I think it's a strength to be able to show emotion.
And it really is. And I believe that as well. So I really believe that is. And you'll see me feel like the whole influx of emotions, right? So like whatever it is that I'm feeling, you're going to know, like I truly wear my heart on my sleeve. So
I don't understand how you hide it. I haven't figured that out
yet. Me neither.
I have a partner now, and much to his chagrin, because he's like a non-crier, you know, like there are like 3 things that are okay to cry at, you know, like so it's a very interesting mix there.
I recall being at I had a boyfriend when I was 18 or 19, and when I had met his grandfather, who was in a coma. I had never met him before. I went with him to the hospital and met him when he was in a coma. Then he died. And I went to the funeral and I cried throughout the entire funeral. And he's like, you didn't even talk to my grandfather. Like, why are you crying? I'm like, I don't know.
Right. But other people are crying and you're seeing them cry, which triggers crying. Plus it, you know, it triggers things within us, our own memories and our own, we're not just crying for that person, we're crying, you know, for ourselves and the meaning that it means in our lives too. So
it really
it's multi-layered. People need to understand that.
It definitely is. Like, it's crazy. And
right.
And it's crazy. And it's not that crazy. Like, the emotional part of it isn't crazy to me. It's the craziness of like you said, like, how do people stuff it? Like, how can you push it down so far that it doesn't come up? Like, I don't understand. Like, and it doesn't matter what it is that I do. It's like, it's right there. Like, it just comes up.
But think about it too, right? So people who do stuff, if you stuff things, it comes out. It just doesn't come out at that time. It comes out in other ways. And so people are seeping all over other people at inappropriate times. And I just think, you know, well, like, we're just letting it out at the appropriate time. And they're just going to let it out, you know, like being mad at their spouse or you know, doing other things. So I think maybe I'm just,
I love that perspective though.
I think it's true, right? Yeah. You know, if we stuff our feelings, they come out. They just do.
And we see that those people that seep. Right. So, like, I love that. Yeah. So this has been great. And so one of the things that I've put inside the comments for anybody who has seen it is that Kathleen has offered a PDF to her book. And so I put in her email, and if you put in the subject line book, then she will email you her book, a PDF to her book. And I'm definitely looking forward to reading it. And I've really enjoyed having this conversation, because this is a conversation that we don't have enough of. Right?
Oh, right.
We don't have it, because it's like talking about death is like taboo, right?
Oh,
so
yes, we're a grief illiterate society because it's been relegated away, out of the norm, you know, and so we don't know what to do. So we have to give people a break. Last thing I'll say. The people who say the inappropriate things, the people who mean well but aren't quite making it, we do have to cut them some slack, because we're not trained on what to do or what to say, and so we're at a loss. And so a little compassion for them too.
Absolutely. So thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And I definitely look forward to reading your book. And if you want to share with me, I know that you were talking about your grief support. If you want to share some information specifically about that, I would love to share that out to people as well. So we can put that out there as well, so that people have connections with that.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely chatting with you.
Thanks so much. And thanks for the cry. I needed that this morning. So
great way to start the day. A good cry.
So I will chat with you later, and I will talk soon. Bye for now.
Bye-bye. Thank you.